Okay, in this example, I'm going to explain to you how to perform independence test, which is section 12.2, using the calculator, using StatCrunch, and using the table, the critical value approach. In 2012, the General Social Survey conducted by University of Chicago asked participants the following questions. Do you favor or oppose the death penalty of persons convicted of murder? Do you think the use of marijuana should be made legal or not? And we have the results displayed in what we call a contingency table. For example, 191 means there were 191 people who said that they favor the death penalty and they think marijuana should be legal. If you look at 171, for example, it means that there were 171 people who responded that they oppose the death penalty and they think that marijuana should not be legalized. The totals here that you see right there, these are usually are not given to you in the table. You can add them up. Like 532 means the total of all who favor the death penalty. 275 all who oppose death penalty, and 807 is the grand total, is everyone who was surveyed. So 807 is the grand total. If you want to know if there is a relationship, let's say he asks you to test the claim that there is a relationship between death penalty and marijuana beliefs, what hypothesis should you test? Your null hypothesis should be always that the variables are independent. Here the variables are your opinion on the marijuana use and your opinion on death penalty. So will be variables are independent, and HA or H1 will be that variables are dependent or related. And since he's asking us if there is a relationship, so our claim will be in H1. So this is how you state HO and H1. Now I'm going to show you how to find the test statistic using the calculator and also using StatCrunch. I'm not going to show you how to do that by hand. It's a lot of work to do that by hand. So we're just going to try to save time and do it by calculator and using Stat. So that concludes the problem. Now I'm going to show you how you could have done this in StatCrunch. Okay, in StatCrunch. Let me just bring the StatCrunch. Okay. If you have the option to click on the upper right of the data set and open it in StatCrunch, great. If not, this is what you have to do. So in variable 2, in variable 1, you just put favor and oppose, starting with the 1 here. And then you change the name of variable 2 to legal, variable 3 not legal, and you put the data, just like it shows in the table. Then you go to stat, tables, contingency with summary. You select always the second and the third. Press and hold down the control key. And then for row labels, you select the first one, which is just whether marijuana penalty. You can put anything as a title here. And then you hit compute. And look, this is the test statistic, which is 0.287. And look at the p-value, 0.5922. And that's what we got. That's the grand total. Look what the calculator did, the grand total, etc. But I'm going to show you something else. Actually, the calculator can find the expected values. For each observed values, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. There is an expected values. Let me show you how we could have done that. Table on StatCrunch, and then I'm going to go back to the calculator and show you how to find the expected values. Okay, so we're going to select legal, hold down the control key. Then here we're going to select marijuana. And here I'm going to say display expected count. Right here. And look. So if he asks you for the expected values, this is how you do. This is how you get them using StatCrunch. For 191, the expected count is 194. For 341 is 337.53, etc. Now here's how you can do this by hand. To find the expected value of 191, here's how you do it. you take the total of the row that contains 191, which is 532. And you take the total of the column that contains 191, which is 295. So you multiply 532 times 295 and divide by the grand total, which is 807. You should get 194.47. To do 341, guys, you take the total that has 341 in it, which is 532. You take the column, which is 512. So you multiply 512 times 532 divided by 807. For 104, it will be 275 times 295 divided by 807. And then for 171 will be 275 times 512 divided by 807. So you have to do the totals in order to do this